Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Koski. Fun day back at it for you and once for yours. And we still in the still doing the series Africa World War II Africa. You know what I'm saying, about the battles and the situation that's not been taught to us in the history books about what Africa contributed and how much they was doing and stuff like that. This gonna give a little bit more of a better backdrop. This is from my book. I can't think of the book right now. I'm gonna say the book at the end. I can't think of the book off the top, but this is from a book. And giving an introduction, giving more of a backdrop because it's not really explained that much in history. You know, the things I found out and that's going to be explained to, you know what I'm saying, the French really didn't give a damn. You know what I'm saying? Most of the white French was okay with the German rule and stuff like that, you know, so they really had no problems. If you read, for those who are able to read it, if you read Hitler's book on Mein Kampf and stuff like that, the first chapter is called The Bastards of the Rhineland, you know, and in that chapter, he talk about killing black people, you know, and everybody was down with that, killing really black soldiers that made mixed babies and stuff like that with German women. And everybody was kind of cool with that. That's how you finally see how to ease it across to eugenicist policies and stuff like that. Jews was cool with it too, you know what I'm saying? They didn't really get too much of a thing about it. So, you know, they really didn't give a damn on that. And they thought of them, the French did too, as lesser, you know what I'm saying? So, this kind of, that's why they kind of written out the history books. That ain't no kind of, that's one of the reasons why they've written out the history books. And I was gonna explain some more in this thing right here. This is the introduction to the book, which I'm gonna name a little bit later. In June 1940, France come under German blitzkrieg. Roughly 40,000 Africans in French uniform during the May-June campaign fought violently and died in droves during this brief and tragic Battle of France. German forces infamously committed war crimes against African soldiers who had surrendered, summarily executing approximately 3,000 of them immediately after fighting ceased. Nazi propaganda reel marked some African prisoners and derided the French high command for using black combatants. Captured black troops hailing from predominantly French West Africa will spend amongst the remainder of the war in prisoner of war camps, guarded by Germans, then astonishingly as 1943 by Vichy French guards. These events are well established, recounted by historians. Some of the stock images sewn and resewn and documented starting with the sorrow and the pity, but seem less recognized as only months after the France defeat, another army was raised in French Africa to fight the Nazis. In late August 1940, Charles de Gaulle's Free French seized Cameroon, French Equatorial Africa, and vast territory spanning south of the equator to the Sahara. They promptly turned into the first hotbed of French resistance. The Free French Africa lent immediate credibility, legitimacy, manpower, and revenue to the Gaulle's movement in its infancy when it was most fragile. This story is the story of this improbable French military and institutional rebirth through Central Africa I wish to tell here. Now, sidebar, as I said before, the French had to rebuild their army, you know what I'm saying, because it got decimated, and they went to Africa to rebuild it through their African colonies. That's not really discussed much through history, but you know, we're going to open it up right here. With what raged anti-Gaulists both from the left and right, the communists and the Vichy's relentlessly propagated the myth of a London resistance. To both sides, I counter with the truth. Free France was African, and it still is today. Sidebar: you go to France today, it look like like you in Africa still. You know what I'm saying? And they can't deny that fact. So claimed the prominent free Frenchman and ideologist Jacques Cousteau in his memoirs. Indeed, in the fall of 1940, London offered Free France neither combatants, raw materials, territories, nor sovereignty. Territorially, Free France spanned from the Libyan border with Chad to the Congo River and scattered with small French territories in the South Pacific and India. Without support of these colonial holdings, what credibility, what international recognition, what counterweight to Vichy legitimacy could a maverick general in London have mustered? While we now know in details the motivation of Felix Houban, the black Guyanese governor who rallied to Chad to Dr. de Gaulle on August 26, 1940, not to mention the exploits of French domestic resistance and the fate of the first Gaullist bastions of the FEA in Cameroon, has remained curiously overlooked, save for a handful of specialized French language studies concentrating predominantly on Gabon and Cameroon. Sidebar, as I said before, this is going to be a hard subject for me because my French is not up there. My parlez-vous is not up there, so I got to look and dig and look, but I don't mind because it's a subject that needs to be talked about. Between August 1940 and the summer of 1943, the heart of Free France was not located in London, as standard accounts would have us believe, but rather in Free French Africa. Instead of a royal-cuffed white massing in its Alps, the archetypal early French resistance fighter between 1940 and 1943 was, in fact, black and hailed from Chad, Cameroon, or Armakari, the modern-day Central African Republic. Some of these early fighters volunteered, others did not. For a movement whose glory rests in the past notion of personal patriotic commitments, this revelation alone shifts our understanding and teaches to shift our understanding of the Free French ranks. In addition, the histories of the resistance teaches us that the Metropolitan France Marquise only gained momentum in 1943. We also know from Jean-Francois Marco's work between the fiasco at Dakar on September 25, 1940, and the end of 1942, Free France struggled mightily to recruit outside its colonial holdings. It was thus attempted to situate a lion's share of the first armed French resistance between the Sahara Desert and the Congo River. This, of course, leads us to rethink France from its colonies, a current historical trend that's already present in parallel of General de Gaulle in 1940. Indeed, one of de Gaulle's first steps involved in his June 1940 called the Azorian colonials to join him, and if possible, with their territories. Has the story of Free French Africa really been forgotten? Aside from a few expectations from the Mont Blanc Memorial outside of Paris, one looks in vain for plaques or testimonials to FEA and Cameroon contributions to the Free French cause. To be sure, recent histories have recognized the crucial role of French colonial troops in the general during the 20th century's two wars. The topic, broadly conceived, even captured the public imagination with the release of Rancher Child de Bar 2006 film, and yes, usually translated in English as Days of Glory. A few years later, Jean-Francois Marcol and François Brachon and Georges Collalin broke a taboo by asserting that the majority of the Free French who saved the nation honor in 1940 were not French citizens. But even here, FEA and Cameroon's contribution remain largely unrecognized. Many a narrative starting with Bocca's film commenced in 1943 with the French Northwest Africa entering into the fray. This broken chronology serves as an obscure and another reality in memory. The tens of thousands of Chadian, Congolese, Cameroonian, Gabonese, and French African soldiers in the Gaulle camp since August 1940 who managed to wage battles against the Axis from early 1941 onward. My research reveals the extent of the FEA and the Cameroon effort starting in 1940. Between 1940 and 1944, Free French Africa recruited 17,000 Africans in these territories. One should add this total to the troops already in the location in these regions when they swung over to Charles de Gaulle at 16,000 men, according to Julius Rock, and now 7,000 according to other estimates. A possible overlap may exist between the two groups, but the FEA and the Cameroon rallied to de Gaulle in August 1940. A small portion of a possible 33,000 might have been counted before twice. Allowing for this corrective lens leads me to a conservative estimate of 27,000 men in arms from the FEA and Cameroon, either hailing from these territories or already posted upon them in August 1940. To be sure, this figure is lower than the number of Africans who fought in French uniform during the Battle of France in May and June 1940. But the fact remains that outside of West Africa, close to the FEA and Cameroon, West African troops found themselves out of combat between 1940 and 1943, either in prison camps in France or languishing in Vichy-controlled French West Africa. In fact, the figure of 27,000 men from FEA and Cameroon appears startlingly high when compared to Free French totals estimates for the summer of 1943, placing Free French number at approximately 73,000, broken into roughly 39,000 French citizens and 30,000 colonial subjects and some 3,800 foreign nationals. Given that other colonies like French South Pacific also contribute men to the total on top of the FEA and Cameroon's 27,000 or more, and the figures of 30,000 colonial troops in 1943 needs to be revised upwards. In other words, the Hollywood cliche the average Free French soldier, seems in dire need of rewriting. The actual diversity and cosmopolitan of the Free French ranks is surely more evocative than the film can convey. In 1942, ethnic Sierra men from Chad and Oregon Kari fought side by side with German Jews and Spanish Republican French legionnaires in the Sahara, and they're traveling endless expanses of the desert from their bases in Chad. Men united in their common demonization of Hitler confronted Roman's forces head on. This led us to the FEA important strategic role. In 1941, then Colonel Clerc used Chad as a base from which to attack Benito Mussolini's Libya. Free French Africa also brought the Gaul into legitimacy, territories, and subject, making Free France not just a movement, but also a government. De Gaulle rarely recognized this. He wrote in 1940 that the vast expanses of Africa, France could rebuild its army and its sovereignty. If Free France was African, I should underscore from the outset that Africa was not free. Indeed, forced labor redoubled under the Gaullists and coerced military recruitment as well. Gaullist jewelers René Cassin and Governor Flexi Bon clashed on the topic. The former fearing that Free France might cause a slavery-like practices. The overriding imperative of waging war on the Axis was used to justify many a sacrifice and many a violations of Free France's own ideals. So they basically just took a little bit of slavery. The routing of the FEA and the Cameroon in August 1940 would later be mythologized, an event earning the French revolutionaries designation of the Three Glorious Days. But at the time, change triggered much turmoil. Prior to the war, 90% of the FEA and Cameroon exports had gone to continental Europe and the vast majority to France. That market was now closed. The region economy entirely redirected into the British imperial orbit. There were two, the stakes were high. The archive shows that administrators and corporations never managed to overcome their differences, in the gold and timber sectors most notably. The Free French episode in Africa reveals much discord in the time of an imperial reordering. A skeptic might counter that the Free France military saga, at least down to the last details. Admittedly, Free France's first victories are well known. So too are the colorful details of Philippe Clerc's meteoric ascension as he added colonel stripes to his uniform to facilitate Free France's seizure of Cameroon on August 27, 1940. Likewise, in France, the Couple Oath remains legendary in military circles. Clerc's pledge in the Libyan desert that he would never relent until the liberation of Strasbourg. All the more reason to re-examine this history through African and colonial lenses. For in the memoirs related to these early French exploits as the history of the Free French movement, Africans and Africa appears ambiguous and indivisible. Most relevant memoirs tend to specifically name which of each fallen white soldiers, followed by a figure of usually much higher, reflecting anonymous African losses. Free France Africanness has suddenly been foregrounded. One of my objectives involve recovering African voices, actions, and roles and conditions, merely not for the soldiers, but also for the truckers, miners, chiefs, porters, workers, streamless, orderlies, rubber collectors, all of whom played a role in Free France African history. My goal is to measure not only how Africans contribute to the Gaullist cause, but also the ways of the war and free French matter to Africans. How? Firstly, by naming African workers, civilians, military personnel, whenever possible, a seemingly modest aim, but a significant one in the light how this has rarely been done to date. Next, by tapping into the monopoly of resources that reconstitute rebellion conditions in free French Africa. I've utilized letters, telegrams, reports, logs, journals, memoirs, and of course, but also pictures taken from the titans of photography like George Rotter and Germaine Curl. Finally, whenever possible, I have attempted to recover African voices. The task proved less challenging than I first feared, but the African testimony and grievance abound in legal and military files. One must admittedly place such evidence in the content of the account for such filters, self-censorship, and the question of transcription, literacy, intermediary, scribes, and so on. While I make limited use of some interviews conducted by historians in the 1980s, I have not undertaken my own oral history. Indeed, surviving African soldiers from this era are now in their 90s, non-commissioned officers, hereafter NCOs, over 100 years old. Average life expectancy does not help. In Chad, it stands at 48.9 years. In Cameroon, 50.6. In the Republic of the Congo, 54.27. In the Central African Republic, 46.9 before the current civil war. The French press reported in 2011 that Joseph Dameron, the last surviving African combatant from the 1941 Free French victory at Carrefour, has passed away. What is more, even in our arranged interviews with members of the next generation, the project chronological sensitivity is focused on the shifts and embrace over a short 4-year period in the political, social, and military focus of all rendered impertinent, reliable, and sharp testimonies virtually impossible to gather for 75 years on. Methodology and intellectually, I reject the notion that oral history should be mandated for council conducting African history when it's not patently not for other historical fields. This is not to suggest that my approach is somehow militant or an example of Fred Cooper terms doing history backwards. Instead, for calling for a redress in African pensions, my objective is to recenter free France in Africa. I have also opted for the focus largely on practices rather than representation, nor am I intent on simply projecting French categories of resistance and collaborations to Africa. Instead, it is the centrality of Africa to free France that I attempt to reconstruct this book. I deposit the Africanness of free France on a number of levels. The Gaulish troops engaged in Kafara. Sidebar, we're going to talk about that battle. We're going to talk about that battle more in depth. And in the Fezzan in 1942 and 1943, were overwhelmingly African. The Free France territorial legitimacy stems for almost entirely from Equatorial Africa and Cameroon. Indeed, Brazzaville serves as the number movement official capital from 1940 to 1943. Likewise, fighting France fiscal and mining assets and other natural resources were predominantly African. The General Charles de Gaulle regime moved his capital to Algiers in 1943, and thereafter, North and West African troops did begin to play a crucial role. The fact remains that for the first 3 years of existence, Free France had to be turned to a sub-Saharan African and built on it. I would likely steer clear from one of the best-known events held in Brazzaville late in the war, as his most imperial story of Free France in Africa. The Brazzaville Conference in 1944 has often been depicted as an attempt at the colonial reform and a step towards, or even a step towards decolonization. Admittedly, the event did introduce, in some cases, a significant reformist spirit. But most of the conference looked to the post-war and marked all above a break with the war period that concerned us here. I will therefore raise in the epilogue while avoiding the typical temptation. Here I also break with current practices which involve mentioning Free French Africa only in its extremities, which is to say at its inception in August 1940, and then once more at 1944 Brazzaville Conference. The book draws on sources from numerous archives such as archivized, including holdings in sub-Saharan Africa, and long overlooked by historians of World War II. The National Archives of Cameroon and Uganda and of the Republic of Congo and Brazil both yield valuable material. Archetypal participant during the decolonization saw France to take so-called fondue champagne, while African notions retained fondue Gaston. Consequently, some of the most representative material for the social history remains on location. This said, archives in French also proved crucial for this study, even shedding light on the earliest Free French period marked by a relative lack of documentation because of the high degree of improvisation. I rely especially on the extraordinary rich collections at the French Colonial Archive at Aix Province, and the Center Historien des Troupes, Chedman and Fazis, and the military archives in Venice, revealed much about troops' conditions. Also very useful was the webbing of the sources in Paris, most notably the archives of the Order of La Liberation and those of the Gaulle and the Kirk Foundations. So too were the High Commissioner to the Free French Africa Funds held at the Diplomatic Service in Nantes. Several collections in the United States, the United Kingdom, and Germany helped flesh out the picture. Indeed, foreign Free French volunteers like Hasso David, Germain Carrel, George Rhoda, and Dudley Harmon left a remarkable insight of visual and textual testimonies on Free French Africa. Together with various sources, allow me to weave together a study of intersections of the histories of Africa, Empire, and World War II. Free France was largely tested and dependent on Africa. Africa shaped it and affected them. Over the next three parts, I will expose many forms of this relationship to matters of legitimacy with respect to military affairs and extraction of natural resources. Finally, in the epilogue, I should turn to questions of memory in its post-war use. And there you have it. That was just the introduction. Free Africa's African Gamut. That's, but the name of this book is written, there you go. Free French Africa in World War II. That's the name of the book. You know what I'm saying? So that's the reference I'm be coming through on some of this stuff, But he talks about a lot of stuff. Like I said, the Battle of Kafuru, we're going to talk about that. And he's making a case that, which you can really, if you really can piece it through history, you look at Field Marshal Pétain and Pierre Laval, you know what I'm saying? And like I said, a lot of French was down with the Nazis. They wasn't even, it is what it is. We don't like these black people anyway, you know what I'm saying? To do what you will with them, So it pieces together a lot of stuff that should be known. And also saying the capital of the Free French forces was in the Congo. Then in 1943, where the history book picked it up at, it's in Algiers. You know what I'm saying? But that didn't happen. Where was it at from 1940 to 1943? You know what I'm saying? It wasn't in France. And they said it wasn't in London. So, that's why they had these battles in that area to get that area, which is not really discussed that much to us as a people. Anywho, we're going to be coming out of this book once again, Free French Africa in World War II. It's going to drop stuff down about what happened. Also, too, on a sidebar note, I got to make sure this, this led to the Pan-African Conference in Manchester, Manchester, England. You know what I'm saying? It's one of the things that led to it, that the build-up on the French side of it, you know what I'm saying, or the colonial, on the African side of it, the continental African side of it, you know what I'm saying? But they all have fought this stuff. No, we're going to do some more. This might be a longer series than I think. But we look at the British side of it, too. They was doing the same shit the French was doing. Anyway, much love. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button. Donate to the movement, because you know what I'm saying, we're putting this history on out there for our people. Let them know what's up. And most of all, man, just thinking have a wonderful day. Peace.